Welcome to In the News for May 24th, 2024. My name is Brett Burney from appsinlaw.com.
And this is Jeff Richardson from iPhone JD. Good morning, Brett.
Good morning, Jeff. It's good to see you. It's good to talk about the iPad again. Well, okay, let's talk about several things. One of the first stories that you linked to today, which you even wrote about many years ago, which was just interesting. I think today we take the I in iPhone and iPad for granted, but maybe there is some movement afoot to get rid of the I. And as much as I was reading not only just your article, but then this one that you linked to in Wired, I'm like, oh, yeah, we've already kind of started down that path, right? I don't have an iWatch. I have an Apple Watch. I don't have an iTV. I have an Apple TV. A little bit interesting and a little bit sad, I think, to think that this could be an era that is over. The I era may be kind of over, or at least starting down that pathway.
Yeah, I think it is over. I think that Apple has moved away from using the I in its products a long time ago. The problem is that when it did use the I in its products, starting with the iMac and then with the iPod and the iPad and the iPhone, is that so many of those, I mean, frankly, every one of those products became iconic and such that there was no reason for Apple to change the name. I mean, now that the iPhone is the iPhone and everybody knows it, there's no reason for them to change the name. They would have to change the product substantially. There's just so much brand equity built up to it. So the person that's featured in the Wired article, Ken Siegel, it's interesting because he is the one, he's the guy that was in the room. He worked for the ad agency that worked with Apple back in the 90s. And he was the one, he was part of a small group of people that were pitching ideas to Steve Jobs for what to talk about it. I've heard this story many times and I'm still amazed by it because it seems so bizarre to me that one of the things that Steve Jobs was attracted to as a name was he was thinking of, the Walkman was still an iconic brand from the 80s from Sony. And so he's like, well, if there's a Walkman, well, what if we called it the Macman? And to me, that name is so awkward that I'm like, how could that have possibly been in consideration? And yet, I will say this, in its defense, perhaps the reason it sounds so awkward, I don't know if I can actually believe this, but perhaps the reason it sounds so awkward is just that we're not used to it. And I say that because I know when the iPad came out, some people made fun of the name because they're like, oh, it's like a pad. I don't know, whatever.
Yeah,
they thought it was a silly name. I remember when the Nintendo Wii came out, people thought the name Wii sounded funny. But you get used to names over time. But the other funny thing about the story is that he describes how once he thought that iMac was the one to do, he pitched a bunch of names to Steve Jobs, and Steve Jobs didn't like iMac. And so then he came back the next day and pitched a bunch of other names, but he kept iMac in there. And he said that some of the other names were really just ringers. They were things that Steve Jobs would reject, so that when he came to iMac the second time, Steve was like, okay, well, maybe it's growing on me now. And then, so I think it's sort of a fun story. Yeah. So it's a nice trip down memory lane of, where did these titles come from? And then, of course, it was because of the iMac that we led to everything else. For many, many years now, Apple has instead switched to using the word Apple in the name. So it's Apple TV, Apple Notes, Apple Mail, Apple everything, Apple Watch. And so I'm sure the Apple Vision Pro. So, I think in the future, it's going to be the word Apple, not the small letter I. But still, these products that have the I in them are going to stick around for a very, very, very long time. And, just as a side note, people still think about this, Brett, because that post that you showed before that I wrote back in 2009, how many years ago was that?
2009, that's right.
You know how, you look at web statistics and you're on a website, and like this post still gets a lot of hits. So people still do a lot of Google searches about, why the I in iPhone. So I just think it's funny that it's sort of it's still a topic on people's mind.
That's fantastic. Okay, so I see this little picture you had in here. Did the I originally stand for internet? Although in this little picture from your post, you had internet, individual, instruct, inform, inquire. That's a Steve Jobs slide on there. But I've always assumed that the I stood for the internet because, at the time, we take this for granted today, but at the time, that was interesting that, like, hey, a computer that can actually connect to the internet very easily without like a modem, separate modem, all that kind of stuff. It's all built in.
Yeah, it reminds me, there's this concept, there's this term called a backronym, where you first come up with the acronym and then you find a way to make it make sense. And I think that that's what happened here, is that once they had the I, which I think Ken Siegel says, I don't know if it's Siegel or Segal, but he says that it really was for internet. I think that Steve Jobs then found some other reasons for the word I that he used in his slide. But it's hard to remember this, but back in the 90s, it was actually hard to get on the internet. You could pay for something like AOL,
exactly.
which would indirectly get you there. But, computers, it was not very easy to do. And one of the and one of the big parts of the iMac is that it was so simple that you did not have to get a separate modem and figure all that stuff out. I mean, the famous iconic commercial that Jeff Goldblum narrated was, you just take the iMac and you plug it into the wall and you plug it into your phone line, and that's it. There is no step three, was the ad. And I think that and at the time it was pretty revolutionary that the iMac made it easy to get on the internet. So there's no question in my mind that the I originally stood for internet back in the days when getting on the internet was a pretty special thing. Nowadays, the internet is so around us, we don't even think about it.
The I began with the iMac. Apparently, other discarded names included Rocket Mac, Every Mac.
Every Mac. I don't know about that one.
The Maxter. I think that. But just like you said, it was apparently Steve Jobs was truly leaning heavily towards the Mac man, just simply because, at the time, again, this is, hard for us to imagine. Other than for those of us of a certain age and vintage, Jeff, that can remember the Walkman. I mean, that was amazing that you could literally walk down the street with the cassette player in your headphones. I mean, just the fact that you could walk around. And so I do understand, I think, why Steve was drawn to that, because it would just seem like that was amazing to us, that we could just walk down the street anywhere and have the music with us like that, without having a big lugging around a big boombox of some kind. And so I can see where where Steve Jobs, I think, would have been drawn to that Macman from the Walkman. But I'm glad that Ken, and he's told this story several times. In this story from Wired, just quickly, it reminds me, I remember this now in this picture. 2014 was when the Apple Watch was introduced. Tim Cook was on the stage introducing it. But in an ABC News interview, he did slip. And he did call it the iWatch at the time. So that just tells me that there was probably some internal discussions, maybe many discussions, about which way to go with this, if it was the Apple Watch, the iWatch. I don't know. I think we all assumed it was going to be the iWatch just because of the branding aspects on there. I don't know. I can't say that I'm happy either way with the Apple Watch, but I think I do see sort of the writing on the wall that that the I is probably going to be going away. But man, what do we call it then, Jeff? What do we call the iPhone at that point? I don't know if I could just say the Apple phone. I don't know. I feel like I'm going to always have the iPhone. And like it's just seared into our brains these days, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Another thing you reported on, which I don't know that I saw this past week, but apparently some people saw some pictures, some photos on their camera that they had deleted several years ago, and they were back. Surprise! You can maybe explain this a little bit more, because I just heard people talking about this a little bit, and this morning I did upgrade to iOS 17.5.1, which apparently fixes the bug, but now I feel like I've got to go back and see, was I even affected by the bug originally?
Yeah. So when iOS 17.5 and iPadOS 17.5 came out last week, there was this bug that it wasn't a brand new bug. It was a bug in that it exposed something that had been there for a while. For a long time, apparently there had been some corruption in the database on a small number of iPhones, so that even if you had deleted a picture, it got sort of stuck. It wasn't showing up in photos, but it was still somewhere in the background in memory.
It was like in the Files app is what, the Files app is what people have been,
And apparently iOS 17.5 made those photos resurface again, which was interesting, because sometimes these photos had been deleted not just long ago in time, but even long ago in generations. They're like, I deleted that. Like, I might use an iPhone 15 today, but I deleted that photo on my iPhone 10 way back when.
Right.
So how could it come back? And the answer is that, and Apple has now explained this, that when people would get a new iPhone, you could set it up from scratch, but most people would restore from a backup or
Right, of
migrate from
course.
one to the other because you want to have all your settings and all your files and stuff like that. And so you are not only carrying over your app settings and everything else, you were also carrying along this corrupted database that still had that image in it. So when it finally comes out in 17.5, some people were freaked out. They're like, oh my goodness, did it download from the iCloud? Like, was this picture up in the cloud somewhere? And Apple's like, no, 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 no. It was never part of your iPhotos backup or your photos backup to
Right.
cloud. It was just right there on your device, but it did show up. And of course, the thing that made the news is and I don't know that this actually happened, but the speculation was that, oh, well, what if you had a sensitive picture, like a nude picture or something that
Sure.
you deleted,
Right.
and suddenly it shows
Right.
up again? It could certainly be startling. Again, I don't know if that actually happened in real life, but nevertheless, a picture that you've deleted a long time ago coming back is not something that you would want. And so now
Nope.
apparently Apple has fixed it. I'm hoping that they fixed the actual database corruption so that it's not going to happen in the future. But the interesting thing about the fix is, so the fix came out just a week later, which is very fast for Apple to
Yeah.
release a
Right.
new update after we know that from history. So they actually put the pedal all the way down and got this one fixed quickly. But if you
Right.
did upgrade to iOS 17.5, and then if you this week upgraded again to 5.1, if you were caught with the bug, and Apple isn't saying how many people were, apparently it's a very small percentage, but apparently if you
Right.
were caught with the bug, the update doesn't fix it. All the update does is it means that if somebody had not yet updated and they go straight to 17.5.1, skipping 17.5
Yeah.
completely, it means that they will have never, there's no chance they would see the bug in the first place. But for those people who were bitten by the bug, apparently it's still there. And so that's why I was joking in my post today. I've got 65,000 photos on my iPhone. I have no idea if one of those
I know.
is something that I deleted. So I
Right.
mean, maybe years from now, I'll suddenly discover. And if it is something I deleted, most likely it's I usually take 100 photos when I'm on vacation, and you save 10 of them. But
Sure.
you never know which are going to be the good ones until the very end. And so it's probably going to be something silly like that. But it's worth so years from now, if you did update last week and then you updated again this week, if years from now you find an old photo that you're like, gosh, I really imagine I would have deleted that. I mean, it all stemmed back to here. So I just think it's interesting because we all assume that when you delete something, it's gone, or at least more or less gone.
Right.
The iPhone gives you 30 days to undelete, but then after that 30 days, you would think that a deleted
Yeah,
photo
that's it. Right.
is really
Yeah.
deleted. So
I feel like this could be a little bit more of a mess than that, even, Jeff. I mean, one of the main questions I still get from family and friends is, "Hey, my iPhone's full. I'm running out of space." And what is the main culprit in that? It's always the photos and
videos, yeah.
videos, right? Yeah, exactly. That people are storing. So I haven't seen any of this. I haven't looked hard enough, I guess, but I haven't seen this addressed anywhere. But does that mean the photos are getting put back into the photos collection, which means that then it hits your storage component on there? I don't know. I don't know how many photos it's going to be, that kind of a thing, but that's one of the first things that I thought of. And then the second one here at the bottom of this
Brad, I haven't
yeah, go ahead.
I haven't heard anybody say, if you were bitten by the bug, I don't know. Does it mean that one photo came back? Does it mean 1,000 photos? I actually don't know the answer.
Right.
My assumption is
Yuck.
it's just a few, but I actually don't know, because so few people have actually had this bug. I mean, enough have that it had to be fixed. But anyway,
And
so
quick.
go ahead.
Yeah. At the bottom of this article from Chance Miller at 9 to 5, I thought it was good. You just alluded to this quickly. If you do find photos that you deleted in your Photos app that you delete again, I guess, right? Just know that delete doesn't mean delete, right? We've been saying this for years with the Windows side. There is a recently deleted album in your Photos app. So if you delete it from your main photo roll, I still call it the photo roll, then it goes into the recently deleted album folder. And so it stays there for 30 days, just like you said, Jeff. But you have to go into the recently deleted album folder and delete for sure, like delete from all devices, right? Because it does stay in there for those 30 days and it'll delete it after there. But anyway, and it'll ask, do you want to delete from all devices? Because at that point, if it's back in the photos roll, that means that it's also synchronizing with your iCloud account, right? Which means now it's on your Mac photos and it's on your iPad photos and all the other places. Wow. The more I think about this, it's a little bit of a mess. But anyway, I'm very glad that Apple quickly addressed it. And I'm so happy you linked to the Joy of Tech cartoon today. So people could, I don't want to ruin it. You can go and read the Joy of Tech for yourself there and see how other people interpret this issue. It's Thinpossible, Jeff. I know what we talked about last week
Impossible.
about your brand new iPad Pro and how thin it is and how jealous I am right now. But a couple of interesting articles here. You linked to one about the iPad Pro, and then Jason Snell talking about a potential iPhone Ultra. Let's talk about this. I like how Wesley Hilliard here in AppleInsider calls the luxury technology in an impossibly thin package. Now he's talking about the iPad Pro here. I thought this was a very well done, short, concise, and to the point review here of the iPad Pro. He goes really through everything, and really just interesting in it. But it did get me thinking of sort of that higher end component here with maybe what Apple is continuing to kind of hit. Although, for the rest of us, the masses, there's always the iPad Air, the iPad Normal. There's other options there, but man, is Apple getting ready to push maybe even more into that luxury end market? We'll have to see soon.
Yeah, it's an interesting theory. It was the premise of my review as well, because as I pointed out when I did the review that, originally the iPad Pro was often the one that you went to if you just wanted the bigger size, but you don't need to get the Pro for the bigger size. You can now get the bigger size in the
Right.
Air. And so nowadays the real reason to go with the iPad Pro is if you just want the luxury item. You're spending, it's worth it to you because you spend a couple $100 more to actually get the nicer iPad with the beautiful screen. I will
Right.
tell you, it truly is nice. I mean, just as a small note, I've now been using this new iPad Pro for, I guess, a week and a half now, and
Right.
the OLED screen on it. I joked in my review. Nobody cares how good the screen looks if you're just working on Microsoft Word or you're just looking at the internet. But I'll tell you,
Right.
Brett,
Right.
although technically that's true,
Yes.
it's also not true because I will tell you, even 10 days in, I'm just sitting here using this iPad, even for something as mundane as a web browser or just looking
Right.
at a Microsoft Word document, and I still find myself amazed at how beautiful the screen is. And I'm
Wow.
surprised that
Okay.
I feel that
Okay.
way because the iPhone that you and I both use, the 15 Pro, it has a beautiful OLED screen too. And although I do
Right.
like it, I no longer
Sure.
look at it and think, it's not every day that I'll look at my iPhone and think, oh my goodness, what a beautiful screen. But with my iPad, I'm still doing that. And I think the
Right.
reason I'm doing it is because it's
Really?
such a big screen that
Yeah.
when it
Yeah.
looks, I mean,
Yeah.
OLED looks beautiful. That's why it's the nicest televisions use OLED. This is even nicer than normal OLED because it's the tandem OLED that's so nice and bright. I still just, I mean, again, what price do you put on just the fact that it's nice? I mean, that's
Mm,
just like saying,
yeah.
what price do you put on the fact that you drive a nicer car than you necessarily need to drive?
Right.
And so,
Exactly.
this idea that it's just this premium product that is going to be appreciated by people that want something that's lighter to hold and it's really thin and it's a beautiful screen, and that's what I think that this review from Wesley does as captures as well. Is it's just
Yeah.
nice, it's
Yeah.
just nicer all the way around. So that was one of the things I liked about his review. One more thing I'll talk about before we move on to this the Jason Snell point that you mentioned before is this review does a good job. Not many of the reviewers compared the regular screen with the nano texture screen, and he does it
Oh,
here. He
yeah.
has some pictures, and in
Yeah.
fact he actually has a
Yeah.
slider
Here it
if you
is.
go down,
Yeah.
is that where you can actually on the picture slide across. Maybe so there you go, that's
Oh,
the one right there.
yeah. Here it
And
is.
so he does a nice job of putting the two screens there. And so
Ooh.
you can see that, on the one hand, you can't see a glare with the nano texture, but on the other hand, it sort of diffuses it across the screen.
Mm-hmm.
And even if you're
Right.
looking at things that are, even if you're not in a situation where you have a lot of glare, when you have the nano texture in your screen, it does make things a little bit more muted, which makes sense because it's like a matte
Right.
screen as opposed to a
Right.
glossy screen.
Right.
So you just need to decide. I mean, I think that I personally would prefer the vibrance of a glossy screen, even though it means that I
Definitely.
might have a little bit of glare because I can just move my iPad. But again, if you're in a situation where glare is such a huge problem because you use your iPad outside all the time, then maybe it's worth it to you to lose a little bit of clarity to get that screen. But anyway, I thought his review did a particularly nice job, as you're showing right now in the video of doing this. But but
Oh,
but back
this.
to your other point,
Yeah.
that the idea that this iPad Pro, it's just, if you're gonna, for people that really don't mind spending a couple $100 more to get a premium product, what if that came to the iPhone 2. And that was the idea that Jason Snell was exploring in his article. And, the thing that prompted him to explore it is the fact that there's one of these rumors out there is that we're going to have an iPhone in the future, which is going to be even higher end. And, I think anything's possible. Who knows? But they might go that way. But I actually do think that there's something to this because people love their iPhones so much and they use them for so long that if you told somebody as expensive as the iPhone or the iPhone Pro is, would you pay a few $100s more if you got something that was truly premium? And I do think that a lot of people, and I'm not even sure, maybe I put myself in this camp. I don't know. Maybe depends on what it was. But, a lot of people would say the iPhone is so important to me that I actually would spend even more money if you gave something that was really special. And Jason talks about what really special might mean is like even thinner, much like this new iPad Pro is,
sure.
Thintastic or whatever, an even thinner iPhone or maybe an even better screen if it used, I don't know what a tandem OLED screen would do on an iPhone as opposed to the iPad, but maybe it would make it even brighter than 1600 nits in the highest. I don't know what it would do, but just, whatever the features are, the question is, would there be a market for a super high-end premium iPhone? And I don't know, Brett, I think maybe there would be. What do you think? I think people would buy it.
I do, absolutely. But it would have to be something that would just really make you stop in your tracks. For example, Jason has this little, a clip from a patent that Apple has, and of course, Apple files, hundreds of thousands of patents every year. So it's not, and they don't necessarily act on it. But as I was reading through here, I'm like, okay, but what could it be? And one of the things is a foldable phone. I've got a colleague at work. I can't remember what model it is, but it's an Android phone, obviously, and it does fold. And he's got it to where it's almost like a square, but it's got a screen on that. Then he opens it up, and it's a bigger, what we would think of as a normal phone screen today. And at first, I kind of look at it thinking, "Oh my goodness, who needs that?" But man, it really, he pops it open and he flips it. It's the old flip kind of a phone. I'm not saying that it needs to be that way. I'm just saying if something was really amazing, like if something really caught your eye when it comes to the iPhone, absolutely. Of course there were. I mean, for me, comparing it to something like the Vision Pro, is there a market for that? I don't know. I mean, there was a lot of Oculus's Meta things, that were sold, but it wasn't like a huge market. But I just remember that day, because not only did you get it, Jeff, I remember that day I was in downtown New York when it came out. And the number of people that walked out of the Apple store with a Vision Pro, and I'm not judging anybody, but I'm looking at these folks and I'm like, okay, well, you're not like a tech journalist. I don't recognize who you are. You just seem like you're a normal person, and yet you've gone and plunked down a lot of cash for something that may or may not have exactly. And so that's sort of from a comparison standpoint, and to me, Apple would have to get something, and I don't mean it has to be absolutely spectacular. But it certainly has to be something that makes us, stop and go, oh, like a foldable phone, something that's even more flexible, something, who knows? I mean, that's what they have lots and lots of people to think about on there. But so that answer to that is yes. Just quickly, I just want to go back to the AppleInsider here from this review for Wesley, I believe. I don't know why Apple just doesn't hire Wesley to create this little picture here. When somebody asks, do I need a nano texture? If you just look at this picture here, I mean, there's no question in my mind that I would never get a nano texture screen, because the glossy, the regular tandem OLED one now just looks so spectacular. Okay, and then the last thing quickly I want to ask Jeff, Wesley here does a great job talking about the Apple Pencil Pro. And I thought about you immediately when I read this, because he says he didn't have that hover technology before.
Right.
And I know that you didn't either, Jeff. I would just like to hear quickly, what do you think so far about the Apple Pencil Pro? I didn't even realize this little picture that he has here. If you squint, you can see when he's in the fountain pen that there's a shadow of a fountain pen underneath the Apple Pencil when you get close to the screen on the iPad. That blew my mind, Jeff. How are you working with the Apple Pencil Pro so far?
I'm very happy with it. I'm still putting my thoughts together, which is the reason that I haven't written a formal review on it yet. Because ironically, the Apple Pencil is so important to me. I use it so much that I really want to take my time with it some more.
Okay.
I will
Okay.
tell you
Good.
that
Good.
the thing about the fountain pen, I've seen the stuff on that. I actually don't use a lot of apps that have a fountain pen as an
Okay.
option.
Right.
So I'm not
Right.
seeing it, for example, in GoodNotes or in PDF Expert or something like that, because I don't tend to use the graphical programs. But Apple did create, there's a post that's been floating around the internet that Apple actually created 10 different outlines for 10 different pen functions, things like a
Oh,
marker, a fine point pen, a
like a
fountain pen,
highlighter.
a brush,
Right.
so that you could have different shadows. So it just goes to show that, the time and effort they put into this. The hover feature, for example, that you were just mentioning,
Yes.
although again, that came out 2 years ago, but I never had
Sure.
the
Right.
second to most
Me
recent
neither.
iPad. Neither did you. So this was the first time I've tried hover. It's interesting because as you're about to put the pen close to the screen, this little dot shows up, and sometimes it's a little distraction because I'm like, oh, wait a minute.
Oh,
Is there like some something I need to erase on here? Did I
right.
mistakenly already tap it? So I'm still getting used to hover.
Okay.
I will
Okay.
tell you though that things like the pinch gesture where you come up with the little menu, it
Yes.
truly does change the way that you think about the pencil. Because the first couple of days, I found myself thinking, oh, that floating little tablet that's sort of like a semicircle, it's just getting in my way. And then now that I've been doing it
Oh,
for about a
interesting.
week, I've learned to be okay. Yes, the tablet just sort of shows up because sometimes you pinch up by accident, but you can just ignore it and keep writing. And so you need to sort of train yourself to ignore it if it
Okay.
shows up mistakenly. But
Yeah.
then when it
Yeah.
shows up on purpose, it actually is a lot more convenient to move your pencil like, a centimeter to pick a new pen as opposed to moving up to the top of the screen. And so, I'm still, suffice it to say that my review so far is number one, I'm thrilled to see new features in the pencil.
Okay. Good.
Great stuff.
Yep.
Number two,
Yeah.
these specific new features are nice, but you do have to get used to them because they really do change a bunch. And some of them I don't really even use that much because, like for example, the barrel row feature, I have seen it work. I
Yeah.
have used it, but it's really only useful if you're using a pen that's like really like a brush, something that's long but thin,
Okay.
so that that it would actually make a difference whether it's is it going left to right or is it going up to down. Then you can sort of move the barrel, but that's not a feature that I normally use when I'm just sort of taking handwritten notes and stuff like that. So some features are more useful than others. The haptic feedback is a fantastic feature. So it's definitely an upgrade, definitely a move
Okay.
up,
Okay.
considering
Good.
that it's only
Good.
$30 more. If you're going to get a new pencil because you get a new model, I would
Yeah. No
definitely
brainer.
spend the extra $30 on it. But my thoughts are still sort of coalescing on the pencil. So interesting product.
Review to
And
come soon.
review to come. And yet another one, by the way, it's called the Apple Pencil, not the iPencil. So further proof that Apple has moved
Thank
on.
you for. That's just weird because you're right. Now that's the Apple Pencil used with the iPad.
Yeah.
Okay. Now this is just going to mess with my brain all day because it's like, whether is that an Apple device or an iDevice? I don't know. Speaking of iDevices, your old iPad, you were able to um, resell it or trade in your old iPad Pro 12.9 inch,
Yeah.
and Apple did you very good on giving you a good value for that, which is pretty encouraging. Just to be clear, I think you had a 512 gig iPad Pro. Is that right, Jeff? And it was
Right.
obviously in good condition on there. So your mileage may vary, obviously, on what kind of a trade in that Apple gives you. Although I will say they do a really good job in the purchase page, right, Jeff, of going through when you select your new iPad. You can even put in, that you have this iPad, you're trading it in. I think it may ask for the serial number. I think that's the main thing that it asks for. And so they'll give you like a value. And then, of course, they only give you the full amount, I think, once you get the trade in, right? And you send it in. Anyway, all that to say, I made it more confusing than it really is. It's very easy to do that. But an interesting article you linked to in AppleInsider from Andrew Orr about what to do with your old iPads. You traded yours in, but I know I still got a drawer maybe of like 3 or 4 old iPads from back in the day just because we held on to them for a long time, Jeff. We didn't always trade them in every time.
Yeah, and I only traded this one in because I thought Apple was giving me enough money for it. Frankly, if Apple had
Oh
said
yeah,
we'll only give you 100, 200 for it, which is certainly what they would say for some older models, I probably wouldn't have
right.
traded in. I would have been like, gosh, for that much money, it's worth it for me just to
Interesting.
keep it around. And so,
Yeah.
it's a decision that you need to make on a case by case basis. And some products Apple tends to offer more money for, and others they don't. And so for the ones that they don't, yeah, it is. But the premise of this article is that what he is suggesting based on these statistics is that of all the old Apple products, the iPad is one that people tend to push down the
Yeah.
most. And
Right.
I think there's a good reason for it because I think of all the products, the iPad is the one that really does have a lot of staying value. I mean, as I was pointing out in the
Right.
article, my daughter has my first generation iPad Pro. And when I look at her use it, it's
Wow.
definitely slow. Like when she goes to every time she selects on something, you have to sort of wait a second. And for me, that would drive me crazy. But if you're just going to use it to watch some videos or whatever, it's not really a big deal. I mean, it does that perfectly fine. Or just look at pictures. And so iPads uniquely have a lot of staying value. And, you can definitely get a lot of use in your house home. Heck, I just saw yesterday some article that there's some app you can get in the App Store that does nothing more than turn your iPad into a dedicated photo viewer. So you could just sort of stick it up in the corner of your
That's
house
it.
and just have it
Right.
continuously play. I guess you plug it in for the battery and stuff like that, but just continuously play videos and play photos and stuff, just as if it was a live photo frame. And so there's so many values for old iPads, especially compared to other Apple technology. So I thought this was an interesting article.
I am currently sitting in front of my silver MacBook Pro, Jeff, that has a beautiful black keyboard. If you have the iPad Pro, you can get the Magic Keyboard, and it's either going to be all black or it's going to be all silver. I don't even think. I wish I could be this creative as who did this. His name is Sigmund Judge, an
Yeah.
Apple TV enthusiast that decided I don't want an all black Magic Keyboard or an all silver Magic Keyboard. I want it to look like, well, he was comparing it to the Apple TV Remote. I think it looks a little bit more like my silver MacBook Pro. He bought both the black Magic Keyboard and the silver Magic Keyboard, and he took the black keys from the black keyboard and put them into the silver keyboard. Am I right? I mean, this is just amazing how much work he put into this, but I think the end result is absolutely fantastic. I love this.
Yeah. By the way, Sigmund Judge, he has a number of, he's very involved in the world. He has a podcast, for example, called just the Magic Rays of Light, which I always thought was an interesting name for the podcast, in
Ooh,
which
that's
they
pretty.
talk about Apple TV Plus shows and stuff like that. And so
Right.
it's a cute little podcast to check out. So he's very
Okay.
much involved in the
Okay.
world.
So that's
But
who
anyway,
he is.
you're right. I mean, when you look at the Magic Keyboard for iPad, you either get the black keys with black background, or you get the white keys with silver background, both of which I think look pretty good. But I have to admit, I thought those keyboards, either one of them, I thought they both looked really sharp. And then
I
once I saw
know.
what he did with the black keys and the silver one, I'm like, that's the best of all of them. The version
That's
that Apple
beautiful.
did not make,
This is
and again,
great.
maybe
I
it's because,
know.
as you say, it reminds us of the
The
MacBooks,
MacBook
and
Pro.
and
Right.
that's probably the reason why Apple didn't do it, is maybe they didn't want to go down that route. But it
Right.
really does
Right.
look pretty sharp. Now, the removing keys from a keyboard, popping them off without
Amazing.
them breaking, and then every
Right.
single one, and you have to spend an additional $600 or whatever it is, or I forget I guess they're 350 each. So an additional $350 to get another
So-
keyboard and hope that I mean, you have to have nerves of steel and a much steadier hand than I
Right.
do. But give him credit, he did it, and the end product, he has a very unique looking Magic Keyboard that nobody else has, and it looks really good, really good.
Maybe this is the luxury product, right, Jeff? It's like, I mean, if you want to spend double the amount of money, but I don't want to do these keys. I would have to pay somebody like Sigmund Judge to replace all these keys. Just one thing, real quick. I'm a little confused on these pictures because neither you nor I have the Magic Keyboard yet. But
Mhm.
the return key on here, where is this coming from? Do you see this little picture here?
Yeah,
It's a weird shape on there. But then on the other hand, if I go back up here to the main keyboards, it doesn't look that. I'll have to look into this a little bit. I don't understand where some of those keys come from. Are you seeing this? What I'm talking about here?
yeah,
Like in the
you are
original,
very
the main.
you are very
But
eagle-eyed to see that distinction. In fact, I'm looking right now
Hang
on
on.
the
I know. I'm going to go to apple.com right now because I want to know about this. If that is something that they have. That return key just looks, it's almost like vertical in its way. Here, let me scroll down here. I want to see a picture from Apple themselves and see. I don't know that they sell a different version of that keyboard or anything. Here we go.
Yeah, because as
Talking
I
about
look on the
keyboards.
website, the new Magic Keyboard just has a regular return. When I say regular,
The
it's like a
regular
rectangle
one.
return.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, so I'm not
Whew,
exactly sure what he
good.
was showing what he was showing a close up of there over there.
Yeah,
Interesting.
interesting. Okay, good. But I just wanted to double check on that because I'm like, what? That doesn't sound right. Okay.
Hmm.
Anyway, we'll figure out where maybe that's come from. I don't know if he is getting from another keyboard. Anyway,
Maybe
just
so.
really
Yeah.
kind of cool that somebody is that creative about doing that. Let's go to the Apple Vision Pro. We haven't talked about it in a
Yes.
couple of weeks because we've all been about the new iPads coming out. But something that I know that you have not complained about, but pointed out, Jeff, that while it's amazing to watch a couple of these, I remember it was the lady on the tightrope, whatever that was, right? How amazed you were watching that little video, but that was it. We needed more content. You wanted more content. Well, looks like Apple was listening to you. Now you get to not only watch tightropes, but also parkour.
I tell
Apparently
you,
in Paris. I bet this is going to be. Wait, you've already watched this, right? Is it out
I
already, or
did.
is it coming?
Yeah,
Oh,
it
you
came out late
did.
last
Okay.
night. Yeah, they are very,
Yeah.
very cool. So, the Apple Vision Pro shines the most when you watch immersive videos. And they are these
Right.
videos where you can
Right.
look up, down, left, right. They're 180 degrees. And the
Oh,
between it
wow.
being so much around you, and because the quality of the video is just so good. I mean, they use these cameras that are just so incredibly high end, and everything's so colorful and vibrant and bright. Plus, of course, because the Vision Pro has very nice high quality displays for each one of your eyes. But the
Right.
end result is that when you watch these immersive videos, it is like you are there. I haven't experienced anything else in life that has so transported me and so
Yeah.
just convinced
You
me.
stated
I mean,
that.
again, of course, you're not there. So, but the problem is there's not that many of these immersive videos. I mean, maybe a dozen of them or something like that. And I had so hoped, and again, I hate to complain because they're so amazing, but it would have made me even happier
Right.
if Apple had come out with new content like every week or whatever, as opposed to every month. But the
Hmm.
good news is we do have more content coming. And so, first of all, the second episode in the series called Adventure, the first one was the tightrope, which was perhaps my favorite of all of them.
Okay.
The second one,
Yes.
I watched it
Yes.
last night. It's called Parkour. It's these three guys that are just incredibly talented in the parkour, jumping from one thing to another thing. You know what parkour is. And they're doing it in
They're
Paris and around
Spider-Man,
Paris.
basically.
So
It's
you get the
crazy.
advantage of these incredible views of Paris, including many places that I've been to before, like right next to the Eiffel Tower, and this are places that are very familiar to someone that has walked around Paris before, and other places in the outskirts. So that part was fun, seeing Paris immersively. But then seeing these guys jump around and
Ooh.
do things that, I mean, it takes your breath away. And if I had been watching, my son and I were talking about this because after I finished watching, he watched it too. And we were talking about that. Like, if I had just watched a YouTube video or even a show on television on my big, beautiful OLED television that showed these guys jumping around, it would have been interesting, but it would not have been exhilarating. But for me, when I was wearing my
Yeah.
Apple Vision
Yeah.
Pro, I'm like, I'm not joking. Like, my heart was literally pumping. Not that that doesn't happen sometimes with a movie, but it was just, I
Wow.
was so close to the action, and it was so
Yeah.
intense because it was this virtual environment that I felt like I was there. It really added to it. So in addition to the fact that what the guys
Interesting.
were doing was cool, where they were was cool, it was a beautiful video camera and everything else, the immersive nature of it added an additional element that you just would not have without a Vision Pro. So that was really cool. And the other video
Wow.
that they released last night was, people call it the sizzle reel. It's like this
The
3 minute
sizzle
demo.
reel. Right.
It's the demo. It's called, if you have an Apple Vision Pro, and I know so few people do, you go to the Apple TV Plus app and look for the word immersive, and it's like an example of immersive stuff. And they had this video In fact, it's the video that you see if you go to the Apple Store and you do a demo of an Apple Vision Pro.
Okay.
You see a version of this video. So my hope is that since they updated it last night, they'll also update the version that you see if you go to an Apple Store. I haven't heard confirmation of that yet, but I'm sure they're going to do that. Some of the content in this little snippet in this sizzle reel is the same as before, and it was really good content. Like, for example, a snippet from a soccer game, and there's this one snippet where these hippos come up to you, and they're like baby hippos. They're so cute, and you feel like they're right there. But they have other content added in there too. And one of the things that I thought was particularly, first of all, there's an underwater one with sharks that looks really neat. But so I guess that's going to be a future adventure episode coming out in weeks or months. But another one that was neat is, unlike just the soccer, they also had like a clip from a basketball game where you're sitting right there on the sidelines. And people spend thousands of dollars on sideline seats for a basketball game. I never had before, on the floor. Once you get like a taste of it in this app, now I get in this video, now I get to get a sense of why people spend this much money, because it truly is a different experience when you are right there so close to the court. And it's a little bit of a gimme, but you know how when you watch a 3D movie in a theater, one of the gimmicks that they sometimes do is have something come right towards the camera. It's like, whoa, here it goes.
Right.
So, when you're watching that, not to spoil it, but when you're watching the basketball game, there's a point where the basketball literally comes straight at the camera. And my first thought was, these Apple cameras must be tens of thousands of dollars, and I hope they didn't just break it with this basketball hitting it. But it really does make you jump.
You're
because
so practical.
It's so realistic. So, but they have a basketball game. They have a football game. It was in America. I think it was the Super Bowl, if I remember correctly. And they had a golf game, like somebody hitting a putt into a golf hole where the camera is right there next to the hole, and it's incredibly realistic. I mean, it's like, wow, I've never seen anything like this before. So sports do incredibly well for immersive content. But they also have some new videos. So I was thrilled to get 2 new pieces of content last night. We have one new thing coming next week too, by the way, and I'm sure I'll post this next week. But Marvel on Disney Plus, they have a series called What If. It's been around forever. It used to be an old comic book series where they take like, what if, Spider-Man and Superman were best friends, and they'll have like an episode about that, just sort of like getting out of the canon of the universe, but just having fun with the characters. And so they've long had a series of What If videos on Disney Plus, so that if you subscribe, you can watch those things. And they're just a fun way for fans of certain characters to get more value out of the character. But they have a What If episode coming out next week, which is going to be it's basically going to be immersive. So it's as if some of they're cartoon characters, by the way, not real characters, but they're cartoon characters that will come into your universe. So again, I'll post more about that next week. And I actually I heard that Disney's actually given previews of that video. I think it's like an hour long to people like Jason Snell and others. So I'm sure we're going to actually see some reviews of it before next week. But the point is, between the 2 that dropped last night and the one coming next week, we now have 3 new immersive video things for the Vision Pro, which is good. Again, I realize when I talk about the Vision Pro like this, I know that so few people that I know even have one yet. But the more that this content comes out,
it's still interesting.
At some point in the future, more people will have it 2 years from now, 5 years from now.
Right.
And then we'll have all this back catalog, and it'll be even faster to come out with new information, to new videos, and we'll have even more. But I got to end up and say, this immersive stuff, Brett, this is the real deal. I know the Vision Pro is overpriced. I know it was perhaps, quote unquote, a waste of money to spend so much on something that's such a beta product. But when you spend 10 minutes looking at a video like this, you're like, oh my goodness, what an incredible experience that was, that I would not have had but for this product. It's just amazing.
Jeff, I'm not the biggest fan of heights, and so just hearing you talk about this parkour video, I don't know.
Yeah.
Here I'm also thinking, by the way, with the Vision Pro's been out 3 months, about 3 months right now. Is that right? Somewhere around there, maybe a little bit more. I still have not gone to an Apple store and done the demo. And now I want to see baby hippos and pet them. But now I'm thinking, if I go there, maybe this parkour one will be there. And I don't know. Now that I think about it, I don't know if I want to see the tightrope or the parkour. It's like, let's have a regular video, right? Instead of something that's scary for me. Anyway, interesting. real
one thing
quick.
about
Yeah,
that,
go
if
ahead.
you do
Go
want to
ahead.
go to an Apple store and try out a Vision Pro, there's actually been
Right.
a lot of news about this lately that apparently this is all anecdotal, but people are saying that the Apple
Okay.
stores are not selling them that very. I mean, again, it's a high-end product, and the people that were interested bought them in the first week. And so, like for example, I saw a report from David Sparks the other day. He was saying that he's out in California and he went to the local Apple store, and they had this nice little
Right.
area for the Vision Pro try-ons, like these the curved couches you could sit there.
Sure.
And he said that it was completely empty. And he asked the people in the store, and they say that,
Oh,
we might sell, one of these every once in a while, but like so few people are coming into the stores to try them on. I say all of this because
really?
in the very
Okay.
beginning, it was
Interesting.
actually hard to get an appointment. But if you do happen
Right.
to find yourself anywhere close to an Apple store, my understanding is that not many people are buying these, and so not many people are trying them on,
Huh.
and you don't have to wait that long to get a demo. So, give yourself a half an hour treat and just go
Yeah.
try it on, see what it's
It's
like.
a treat for
Yeah,
the eyes.
it is
I might
fun.
do that actually. I'll have to see that. I'm actually in Los Angeles today, and I know there's a couple of really nice Apple stores here that I always go and enjoy. There's one like an old theater, right? We've talked about it before.
We have, yeah.
Anyway, I might have to see because that you're right. It was such an onslaught in that first month or two when they came out. But yeah, it's time maybe to go get my Apple Vision Pro demo. I think I'm probably avoiding it to some extent, Jeff. Just because I know that once I do it, there's no going back. So I'm like, okay, well,
Yeah.
as long as I don't go there, I don't know what I'm missing a little bit as much, other than I just get to watch vicariously through you. One of the apps that we have loved for a long, long time is
Yeah.
Shazam. Not only because of the name, but I like it so much now, Jeff, that I actually have it as a widget on my lock screen because it was always like, okay, oh, there's a song and it's getting ready to end because I walk into a store or something like that, and I have to unlock my phone, go and find the Shazam app, or the next step that I did is I put it in my control center so I could get to it quicker. Now I even have it on my lock screen as a widget, so I can just jump right into it. Now Shazam has live activities. It'll be a live activity, which I got to tell you, I continue to enjoy this. In fact, I was just walking on a trail a couple of days ago, and I use All Trails. I've talked about that app, and the last time that I used it, they did not have live activity. So every time that I wanted to check where I was on the trail, I had to take out my phone, unlock it, go to the All Trails app, and look at it. But now there's a live activities right on the lock screen, Jeff, and it's great. Well, thank goodness. Shazam has live activities as well. I use this now for Starbucks. They have live activities. I use it for my Lyft or my Uber, watching when it comes, all this kind of stuff. I think you did a good job pointing out that with Shazam, it's usually quick enough that I don't need to like lock my screen or go to a different app, while Shazam is listening. But it is nice to know that it'll be listening into the background if I am trying to check my mail or do something else at the same time. But I'm just, I think the bigger picture for me, Jeff, quickly is I'm just glad that Apple is continuing to update Shazam because
Yeah.
they purchased it a long time ago. It was an app that was independent, and Apple bought it, and we're all kind of like, are they just doing that because they don't want the competition or what's going on? But I'm glad to see that they are continuing to update it.
Yeah, the Shazam technology, the team that works on this, these guys are just amazing. I mean, Shazam is one of those things that's like magic. I mean, it's like, how is it possible
Yeah.
that my iPhone, within
Yes.
a second, and even with all the background noise of real life, can pick out
Right.
this song and instantly tell it to me what it is, and then allow me to
Incredible.
tap one button and I can jump into Apple Music and listen to the song. It's truly, truly incredible.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the update this week is minor. It used to be that you'd have to keep the Shazam app open. Now you can actually jump out of the app and it will continue to listen for, it's not
Great.
terribly long, maybe 30 seconds for a minute, but it will just keep listening,
Sure.
and it'll
Sure.
show you at the top once it identifies the song. But many times, like you say, Brett, it will be that last minute thing. Like the song's just about to end and
Yeah.
you're jumping into Shazam. So any little thing that can give Shazam just a little bit more time to do its work, to Bravo.
Right.
So it's a
Right.
cute addition, but also just a nice reminder to folks that if you don't, if you love music the way that you and I do, Shazam is just such a fantastic little technology. Oh, I love
I
it.
feel like I need to go into the app itself and like look around a little bit more, Jeff, because every time that I use it, I really just do it because I want to know the name of the song. Which again, to your point, we're thinking back years ago where you've heard a song in a hotel bar, or a store or something like that, and you're like, oh, what song is that? And I run up to the counter like, can you tell me what song is playing? Of course, they have no idea, half the time. But the fact that I have this in my hand and I can say, oh, who is that? I think that's so and so, but I'm not sure. And I pull out Shazam and I can hear this. just really incredible. But that's where I stop. Like, I don't go into the app. Now, you mentioned, first of all, the one thing I do is you can go into Shazam and then it'll pull up and you can tap with one tap and go into the Apple Music. Because I use Spotify, I can do the same thing. So it's nice that I think Apple continues to allow us to do that. Like, if I use Spotify, then I can go into the Spotify as well as going into Apple Music. But just really, really great stuff. So happy that Apple is continuing to work on that. Here, this just in, this some really important news that that I don't know if a lot of people are aware of. Atari has now acquired Intellivision. I know. I feel like this is like the headlight from 1989, but it's interesting for those of us that, again, are of a certain vintage. This is, this would be huge. Like, to me, this would be earth-shattering back in the day, because I had the Atari, I had friends who had the Intellivision, but Atari has now announced it has acquired its former competitor from the 70s and the 80s, ending what it says was the first ever console war. Interesting. Times are changing.
Funny. When I was a preteen, I had the Atari as well, and then after the Atari, I had the ColecoVision, which was nice because it would play not only the Coleco games, but it was backwards compatible with the Atari, so you could play them all on there. But I had very few friends that had the Intellivision, but they always had sort of an air of superiority about them, and I forget
exactly.
Why, but there was something about Intellivision, and it's been so long now, I forget. Maybe it had extra memory, or there was something about it that would, at least, maybe it was just the name, maybe it was just the spokesperson that they had in their ads, but there would always be a sense that they were more intelligent games, like the name pronounced, whereas the Atari stuff was just more fun. But it was one of the first sort of tech rivalries from way back when. And so, what's left of Atari nowadays, obviously it's changed hands a million times and everything else, but they do still sell consoles that you can still buy and still play Atari games.
Wow.
And now the same company will be able to have the Intellivision. And I noticed as part of the announcements, you can go on the Atari website and buy like an Atari a t-shirt, or you can buy like a t-shirt that has an Atari joystick on it, which of course, you and I just look at an Atari joystick and instantly know what it is. That same website will now sell Intellivision t-shirts. So, if you want to get your Intellivision t-shirt, you now have a place to go get it. So
this sounds really sad, and I don't mean it this way, but I guess I didn't even realize that Atari and Intellivision were companies that were still operating. I mean, I take it for granted that, it was back in the day. The way that I have fused my, long-time love affair with, the old Ataris and modern day, Jeff, is on my Xbox gamer tag, which, by the way, is Boogie Butter. But on my Xbox now, for my little picture, I went and found a screenshot of one of my favorite games from the Atari 2600, was Chopper Command. I don't know if you ever remember playing Chopper Command, but that's what I have. And so I love it because I put it on there and I'm like, you young kids, you don't even know, anyway, I usually end up losing anytime that I play on the Xbox too. But anyway, it's just fun to that's the way that I kind of, harken back to my old days. But anyway, thanks for the update on the news.
The one that I always think about, and I'm be curious if I ever played it today, if it would be as fun, but there was a game from Activision, which always made the best games for the Atari 2600, called Kaboom. And the way that you controlled Kaboom was you had the paddle. I mean, even to this day,
the paddle
systems really have paddle, but it was the best paddle game. You simply moved your buckets back and forth and picked up the bombs as they dropped. But there was something about it that I would just get so intense into it. And at the time thought it was actually a game I could do very well in. It was just, that intense focus in a game. I don't know that to this day, I have had an intense focus in the game the way that as a preteen I used to have with Kaboom and my paddles on my Atari 2600.
The Kaboom and the paddle. My wife talks about Tetris that way. Like back in the day, like she got very focused on Tetris because you're just really like, zoned in on what's going on there. You linked to an excellent article today from the Wirecutter, which is now the New York Times. I still like going to the Wirecutter for everything. But 15 things you did not know your iPhone could do. And I thought it would just be fun that you and I could pick a couple of our favorites here. I will go first in these 15 items here. The one that I don't use very often, but I love this. Quickly remove the background from photos. Now, you do this in the Files app, or this is where that I've done it. And so I'll go on my iPhone, and you can do this on the iPad as well, by the way. But you go into the Files app, so you have to have a photo that you saved out of side of your Photos app, right? Or a JPEG or something that you saved. This is the way that I typically use it. So I'll export it out of my Photos app into my Files app. And of course, I don't know that a lot of people know about the Files app, but the Files app is a free app that now is available on the iPad and the iPhone. I talk about it all the time as a way to be able to manage your files.
Right.
You can even store files. You can create folders on your iPhone or your iPad, quote, hard drive. I only say that because on our Windows and our Mac computers, we save it on the C drive, right? Or into our user folder on our home folder on the Mac. And in the same way, you can now do that on the iPhone and the iPad. So you save a photos outside of your Photos app into the Files app, or you can, upload it or save it from anywhere else. And then when you go into the Files app, and you see it in the listing, what you can then do is you can, I'm going to try to find one here to walk through as I go through here, that you can tap and hold your finger on it. And in a way, I think of the tap and hold as a right click in Windows or on the Mac. Because when you tap and hold on an image, it comes up with a secondary menu here. And it gives you access to things similar to if you were on your Windows computer. You can copy the file, you can rename the file, you can duplicate the file, you can move the file, all that kind of stuff. But at the bottom, there is now a list of quick actions. So it's like a secondary menu in the secondary menu. And this allows you to rotate an image. Now, these quick actions will change depending on what the file format is. But let's say it's a JPEG. I can rotate the image. I can create a PDF. But one of the options is remove background. And if I tap on this, it will, first of all, create a copy of that image. So I'm not affecting the original image. And in that copy, it'll now say, It'll remove the background, and it does an amazing job, Jeff. You and I have talked about this. One of the best ways that I like to remove a photo background or a background from any kind of an image is I'll bring it into Keynote. I think Keynote does a really amazing job of removing the background on a lot of things. And so I feel like this is probably a lot of the same technology. And then in that same copy with the background removed, it will actually add to the title of that image. It'll say background removed on there so that you have the original version. And then now you have the copy that has the background removed, and it adds background removed to the name of the image. Anyway, that's one of my favorite things. I don't use it all the time, so I have to remind myself, but it is a quick way to do an amazing thing of just removing the background. Now, again, your mileage is going to vary depending on what kind of a background it is. If it's the solid color background, that's very easy. But once you start getting a lot more noise and other things inside the background, it could not look as pretty and as good, but it does a pretty amazing job. That's my favorite from this list that you linked to, Jeff.
Let me just say on the tip that you have to make sure it's clear. So I'm in the Files app right now. If I actually open up the picture, then this little gesture you talked about doesn't work. It's when you're looking at a list of pictures. So while I'm looking at the list of pictures, that's where I hold down for a second, and then I see a big list, and I see what you're talking about, quick actions. And there are another one there is you can rotate left or right. That happens to me all the time. You get a picture, it's in the wrong orientation, quick way to rotate it. I can create a PDF, which is really nice, convert it, and then remove background, of course. So that's a nice little reminder. Again, I don't often have pictures in the Files app. They're typically in Photos, but sometimes you do get them, like someone's transferring them to you and you can save them there and stuff. So that's a very good tip. So anyway, this same article, which by the way, many times when I see an article called something like top 10 things you can do on your iPhone, I know. I consider them to be completely clickbait. I'm like, these are old things that everybody knows and whatever. But this Wirecutter article, I mean, again, some people will know every single one of these, but I always hope that there's going to be something new. And for me, actually, there was something new in this list. Yeah, first of all, people should check it out because it's got lots of good tips in it. Agreed. But the specific one that I had, so it has to do with camera shortcuts. Many people know that if you're in the camera app, if you can use the I guess it's the volume up button if you're holding your camera in landscape orientation, and you can use that to take pictures as opposed to pressing the button on the screen. That's a tip that's been there for a while. But the one that was listed here that I never knew about is I was familiar with the concept of a burst mode. It used to be way back when with the camera that if you held down the camera button, it would enter a burst mode where it would take just as many pictures in a row as it could. And then years ago, Apple changed it so that the default function for holding down the button was that it would go to video. But you can still change this. If you go into the settings app on the iPhone, you can go settings, camera, and by default, the volume up button does video, but you can change it to use volume up for burst. But anyway, that's all stuff that I knew about. Here's one that I did not know about. When you're in the camera app and you're looking at the screen, and you know there's the button there. So if you're holding your camera in portrait orientation like this, then
I'm there
on the button, if you press the button and swipe to the left, or if you're holding your camera the way that I normally do in landscape orientation, press the button and swipe up, it will immediately start taking burst photos, which I had no idea that that was even a function. And so it's a nice way that no matter which mode you have it, you don't have to worry about whether your camera is in the burst mode function or in the video mode function. No matter what your setting is, you can just go to the, just go to the little thing that would, the button, so to speak, and pull up, and it will immediately start taking burst mode photos. And so again, what that means is it's taking photos as quickly as it possibly can. And so if you hold it up for just like 5 seconds, you may have, 50 photos or something. And then what it does is it saves these photos not as 50 individual pictures, but it saves it as a single stack in your Photos app. And you can then go to the stack later and you can go through them and say, okay, I'm gonna keep this one, and I'm gonna keep this one, and maybe pick the one best one or pick the 2 or 3 best one and delete the rest. And then they will save them as individual pictures. And if you're taking pictures of kids, you know how kids blink, they turn the other way, they look up, they look down, they have faces, but there'll be that one split second that if you were lucky enough, you got the one perfect picture of your kid. Burst mode takes that into account, because if you take 50 pictures in succession, one of them will be good. Or, it's also good for action shots, of course. If, something is happening and something's jumping and you want to get like just the right moment, just where the basketball is just going into the net, take a burst mode photo and you'll be able to choose just that one perfect moment. So again, burst mode is nothing new. It's a cool feature that people sometimes forget about. But what was new to me was that you could put your finger on the button and just sort of move either up or left, depending on which way you're holding your iPhone, and get into that burst mode. So it's a nice shortcut to get in there.
I had no idea.
Yeah. And that's just one subset of this one tip on camera shortcuts. There's some other ones in there too that are worth knowing about.
Right.
So, that's just one of the 15 tips. So that's my plug for this Wirecutter list, because it's got some pretty good ones in there. So check it out.
So good.
You might find something that you have never heard of before, even though you've been using the iPhone for a very, very long time.
I had no idea that you could move the shutter button, Jeff. Like, that's amazing to me. I just
By the way, if you go the other direction, if you go down or to the right, it will immediately go into the video mode. And then if you go like an inch to the right, it locks. Yeah. So you can either choose just to have it taken the video while you're holding your finger, or do you want to lock it and then get into the video mode? It's just a cute little gesture.
That is amazing. I had no idea. And then real quick, can I just ask, so once I have a set of burst pictures in my photo roll, how do it tells me at the top, it says burst, and I have 18 photos because I've just been taking crazy ones since you've been talking about it. Oh, and then at the bottom it says select,
it says
right?
Select.
That's how.
So you at the very bottom, you click on the word select, and then you will swipe back and right, and then there's like there's a circle in the bottom right, and you tap in the circle, which has a blue check mark on whichever ones you want to save. Don't check on the ones you don't want to save, and then click on done, and it's going to ask, wait a minute, do you only want to keep the 2 that you just selected, or keep everything? And you're like, no, I just want to keep the 2 that I selected. And then it will delete the burst, so they're not taking up space on your iPhone, and you'll have the 2 or the 5 or the 1, however many you selected. Beautiful. Those are the only ones that show up in the photo reel. Unless you upgrade to 17.5 and then they all come. No, I'm just kidding.
Okay. That's funny. I had no idea you could swipe on the shutter button there. Oh, that blows my mind. That's awesome. Okay, anyway, great list. Like you said, I'm glad that you linked to it. Thank you, Wirecutter, for letting us know. Okay. Whoo, lots of good stuff. Thank you as always, Jeff. I think we got everything wrapped up. So in that case, we'll talk with you next week.
Thanks, Brett. Bye-bye, everybody.